Hi everyone.
Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Dave Miles. I'm the moderator for today's presentation. I work at ValueSource. I've been there for the last 17 years. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our presenter. His name is Jeff Harwell. Jeff is an expert witness out of Texas, and he's been an expert witness, I think, for over 30 years. He's worked with ValueSource here in the recent past, and one of the expert witness engagements that he does is for personal injury. Somebody gets hurt and we need to come up with a amount of damages and what the actual value today is of those damages. And that's what Jeff's going to explain. So Jeff, at this point here, I'd like to turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Dave. And welcome to everybody to Damages Advocate. This is an introduction today. I know that a lot of people here are either interested in getting into the valuation of economic damages and adding that to their practice, or they're looking at an alternative means to calculate those economic damages. So in any event, we're happy to have you there. A little bit about the Damages Advocate product. I want to go over that before we get started. Give you a few of the objectives. The objectives today to provide you this service is I want you to think about this presentation at a 50,000-foot level. Certainly we have the opportunity to get you more into the weeds at a lower level should you be so interested, but hopefully that we're going to provide you the kind of information that you can better understand the product, the application, and how it might help you in your professional practice. Well, first of all, let's talk about a little bit of an introduction and an overview of the Damages Advocate software. Today you're going to learn a little bit about Damages Advocate, what it is, why you should consider using it, and actually how does it work. I'm going to take you through. I'd love to be able to give you a dynamic presentation of Damages Advocate, but what you're going to get to see shortly will be more what I'll consider a static demonstration of the software. But it's going to give you a good feel of the software and the applications that you can use in your practice. Well, first of all, what is Damages Advocate? The way we have set up a Damages Advocate through ValueSource, Damages Advocate is a web-based suite of economic damage calculation software that's used by attorneys, valuators, and expert witnesses covering three specific areas: personal injury, wrongful death, and employment law. There's a number of benefits that you as a professional can benefit through by uses of Damages Advocate and some of its applications. First of all, I think most everybody would be most interested in this. By using Damages Advocate, you have the ability to save time and money. You'll see shortly that the software has pre-formatted entry forms. That means that you just fill in the blank. We also have built-in data tables. That means it's automatically calculated. As we said, pre-built calculation spreadsheets. And at the end, when you've completed the entry into the software, you have got a basic pre-generated report. And that comes to you in PDF, it comes to you in Microsoft Word, and you'll be able to generate the spreadsheet. So you will be able to track that. I'll go ahead and tell you that there's nothing magic about the software. It's either got an Excel component to it, so it's completely transparent, and it has Microsoft Word in the report. That Microsoft Word is also converted to a PDF form. So, and also, after you learn through the process of Damages Advocate, the best news is it's easy enough for staff members to use once they're trained in it. It helps you simplify the calculation process. And I'm going to be redundant and repeat this again because as a consultant, I think it's very important for us to have a detailed process that we complete our projects and our engagements. We use that in valuation, and there's no different in the use of calculating economic damages. We have to have a process, and that's one of the beauties of damages advocate. There's no creation or maintenance of spreadsheets. You have built-in storage of cases, and with a consistent process throughout each of the 3 modules that you're going to see. It allows for a simple and fast creation of master cases. This would be anything different similar to you creating your evaluation software. You can already pre-fill information in, such as your name, your firm name, the credentials, your address, and you can just have a master template. Again, you already know what's necessary. Also in that master form, if you're doing business strictly in one geographical area, you may already be able to set up your forms so the process reflects those statutes and regulations within your specific area of practice. It also provides for simple, fast creation of what-if cases. If you've completed a calculation of damages, then something comes up and your client asks you, well, what if we did this? You can save that case as, say, a version 1, and then put the new scenario in or consideration, and create a second case and see what the difference in the calculation will be. So that's very easy and it's quick to do. You gain a lot of reliability by using damages advocate. Let me explain that. First of all, it was created by a forensic economist. It wasn't just created by a business valuation person. This person was specializing in forensic economic damages, so they know what's expected. It's continued to be tested by value source, expert witnesses using it, and the fellow users. We get input all the time. If something comes up of an improvement, we take that into consideration. If something is not just exactly right, then we're able to address that. So it's continued to be improved and expanded at all times. The other important part is the addition of new data tables. It's always completely kept up to date, and that's extremely important. It's also very time-saving and money-saving. When I first got into economic damages, I'll go to a site and say this. I actually created my own software from spreadsheets, which were before Excel was even in existence. Every time that I changed an economic damages, or if there was a data table or statistics table such as mortality, I had to go to the library. I had to manually input that information in, so there was a lot of copying and data entry in. Here with Damages Advocate, that addition of data tables is automatically put into the software, and so you know it's current, and it remains there in case you've got a retro calculation. You're able to use, as you will see, a pull-down window and choose which year on certain data tables that you choose to use that are applicable to your engagement. Since we have a web-based application, all of the data in the file storage are controlled through value source, and they're heavily encrypted, so you've got automatically off-site data encryption for all of your cases and file storage. This product's been in use and been involved for over 20 years, and again, that's a good testament of testing and reliability. I frequently speak with users during the middle of the week, working with value source when they have questions, and we find solutions, and they're usually asking questions about, well, how would I do this in one particular scenario? How would I do this in a jurisdiction? And we found that the software is very flexible regardless of where you live, where you practice, what your jurisdiction is. So the whole software is evolved that way, so it's extremely flexible to meet the needs of all the users across the U.S. Best of all, I guess in summary, I would say this, that use of damages advocate software allows you to focus on your expertise and not the back office tasks and functions of updating the software, going and doing additional research and finding out what you need to do, or going off on to an area that may be suspect and may be unusual that's in the area of forensic economic damage calculations. So what you're about to see and do is what I would consider generally accepted methodology, statistics, and data used in the calculation of economic damages. So without further ado, let's do a step through so you can actually see how Damage Advocate works. Again, this is a more or less a static step through the software as opposed to dynamic, going through and actually seeing it live. If it's important for you to see it live, I think that certainly can be arranged through Value Source. So, as a online web application, Damage Advocate has you log in. So you'll put your username in, such as you see on the screen in front of you. I've got my name in. Then you've got an encrypted password. You put your password in. You'll have a secure login to the software. This is, for those that are familiar with Value Source, this is very much like when you log into the applications on the web apps of your Value Source subscriptions. I'd mentioned before process. When you're in the Damages Advocate software, depending upon your subscription, you will see a potential of 3 separate modules: the personal injury module, the wrongful death module, and the employment law module. Notice how each one of these is laid out. Look at this as a process map. When you're doing Damages Advocate, it really doesn't matter what your engagement is. Once you have mastered and understand one particular module, the same process goes through in the next module. So it becomes familiar and it becomes simple and it becomes consistent. So with this, you're not working with really 3 pieces of software as much as you are one software with a convenient and consistent and familiar interface. From step 1, case setup, all the way through the results, and at the end of the results is the point where you can print out a report, where you can print out a spreadsheet and see all of the data from your input. So let's get started. We are going to use today, during the course of this webinar, we're going to look at the personal injury report and take you through it. The reason we're using personal injury is because it probably has, without a doubt, more options. Once you become familiar with the personal injury module, you should have no problem whatsoever of completing either the employment law module or the wrongful death module. They're very similar in terms of data. This would have the greatest amount of data. So what we're looking at is the first setup in the process. We're looking at the case setup. Anything in the green area you'll either manually put in, or there'll be a pull down window, such as under this case it's a gender being female, and once you put the data in, you've got it set. Anything that winds up in the black, you'll find out this it automatically does the calculation, like in the spreadsheet that we're looking at right now. After you have put the birth date in a decimal equivalent, it's giving you the current age of the individual here. In the case of Jose Garcia, Ms. Garcia is 38.86 years. This is pretty standard in the area of economic damages, converting years and time to a decimal equivalent. This was also a data table that originally that I had to create way back before software such as Damage Advocate was in existence. We've got an injury or trial date settlement. These are very key. These are some of the key data things that you would be gathering in an economics damage case. So we're right here. We put the whole case set up. Under the firm, this is one of the areas that I suggested that you can set up a standardized template to save time. You've got your name, you've got your firm name. Those can be put up as a standard template in the software, so it's a little more of a time saving. Once you've completed the case setup, you start adding different parts of data. In this case, we'll start with the plaintiff demographics. We've got 3 different pull-down windows which give you options. Once you come to these windows, you'll have certain decisions to make. In this case here in the plaintiff demographics, we've got race, employment status, whether they were active or not active in the workplace, what their highest level of education was. This is important because these will go back into the data tables in calculating the actual damages based upon education levels. So some of these are very important, or they're all very important, not some of them. They're important or they wouldn't exist. They're important in terms of calculating damages. Now, in the case of race, those from a statistical standpoint can be significant, but they can also be significant of whether or not in a given jurisdiction one is allowed to consider the race of the individual. Sometimes justice is blind, so there can be reasons for whether or not you're going to have to fill that out and use a race or not use a race. Now I'm going to step back and say for a minute one thing about damaged advocate. Using the software as a tool itself does not excuse the forensic financial analyst from knowing what the requirements are in the given statute. This is only a tool for the calculation purposes. There are certain requirements that everyone's going to have to know in terms of their given jurisdiction that they're working in and what the statutes and requirements are in calculating economic damages. That is beyond the scope of the software itself. I always tell people that a lot of the software here that's modeled after some of the good text and reference material that's out there that we encourage you to consider reading if you're new to economic damages. As I look across the room, one of the best books is Determining Economic Damages, which is a subscription service which is put out by the James Publishing Company, and it's also was originally produced by Dr. Gerald D. Martin. So Martin and Weinstein produced that service. It's a good backup to understand some of the complexities of economic damages, and you'll find that it fits very well into the damaged advocate software and follows very close to it. So going back to the plaintiff demographics, we have got, once we've done that, we can go to the next tab, which is the retirement age. And here we always have some options to complete. In this case, what's the work-life expectancy? The values are already calculated, but in this case, we're going to use a manual retirement age input. Instead of using the statistical, applying the work-life expectancy based upon this individual's age, we have a manual retirement age, which gives you the flexibility. If you have reason on the subject case that the person was not going to retire to age 72, you can actually put it in, and then that's your data point. It also gives you an area to put down the footnote. You know, what did you base that assumption on that this person was going to retire at age 72 versus, say, 65? Again, this demonstrates the flexibility of the software. The third tab in the retirement lifespan is the lifespan tab. Here we're applying the life expectancy from the life expectancy tables. It's already pre-calculated, showing a life expectancy of 44.41 years, even a projected date of death. In this case, Center of Disease Control mortality tables. These are all statistical tables, generally accepted. So it's already pre-calculated for you. I'll also give you at the end of this presentation, you'll see the bibliography and the source documents for the software. I might also say here on this lifespan, should this particular individual that you're using it have some medical conditions and the lifespan might be less than normally expected, you can choose to use a manual lifespan input and also put the lifespan footnote of why you've used that assumption. The final tab are some advanced options. Again, we've got life expectancy and manual lifespan inputs. Notice that we've got a little stop sign shows up in the software. And the reason you're seeing that stop sign, I'm on lifespan, is because nothing was put in. The software is requiring an answer. So you'll either have to put in and apply the life expectancy tables, or you'll have to put in a manual lifespan input. So if you have failed to complete something that's necessary, you'll get a warning. So this is kind of a built-in situation to make sure you're putting in all the correct data in the Damaged Advocate software. Now to the advanced options. The advanced options require you to give us some additional information as far as retirement, selecting a reference date. What are we going to do? The trial date, which we put down is our reference date. We've got a reference age. This pulls back from our previous input that we had from the original case setup. The work life expectancy, there are a number of data tables and dates of production or publication. So depending upon what your case is, you have a pull-down window to choose the work life expectancy data and publication date that you choose to use for your calculation. Likewise, we've got the employment status, which we've already answered previously, but we're going to put back in, again, the education, and again, here's the life expectancy data. Here we're using Center for Disease Control 2011 for this particular part of the retirement and lifespan section. Anything else that's not in green or selected, again, is already pre-calculated. On this particular slide, I call your attention to the red arrow. Throughout any of the modules, anytime you have a question about what you should be filling out and how you might answer it, you've got a little life preserver icon, which is your help function. By moving and clicking on the help function at all times during the software, you have access to online help within to answer the questions you might have in terms of how you might complete or answer a given question in terms of your selection. By clicking on the help icon, Life Preserver, in this case is work life expectancy, you'll be taken to a table and you'll be able to view information and reference material as far as what your choices are, and explains exactly what's expected for you to enter into the data. So there's no reason that you don't have at any given point in time a reference and a source to help you complete your calculation. Likewise, if you look at this, this is no more than a user's guide at the same time that's online section by section. So after we've completed the retirement lifespan section, we move on to the third section, which is employment. We start with projected employment without an injury in this case. We get to add based upon the employee's past work history. We develop a work profile for the individual, the start date, end date of what he was doing, who his employer was, his initial salary. So we're now beginning to quantify the person's work history. You have an add and edit at any point in time of any one of these tabs. So the second one is, what about the actual projected employment with the injury? Here again, we put the start date and then the end date, what they were doing and how they were doing. I mean, because the real reason for calculation of economic damages is what would the person been made had it not been for the injury. Examples in this case, I've done work in which I've had an individual who drove a commercial truck, was injured, and as a result of the injury, so we knew exactly what that person was making as a commercial truck driver for a good number of years for the truck driving firms that they had. We had the salaries, initial salaries that she was receiving. Then after the injury, which she can no longer drive for any sustained length of time she had attempted, she was relegated after the injury being having to work for an auto supply store, which was substantially less wages than which she was working as a commercial truck driver, and also her hours were limited, not from 40 hours to 28 hours a week. So there's a good contrast between what the person was making and what the person could make had the injury not occurred. And so this is where we're building up that data and doing the profile of the work history of the individual. The next tab comes up to the dependent loss. A lot of people are asking, what is the deal about dependents? Well, a lot of expenses, we have expenses that there are damages that are incurred with respect to an individual that are considered by the courts when a person's injured that have to do with the dependents. In the case of the truck driver, she had a teenage son to be considered with what those additional costs would be with her losing the wages she was earning. Here we're able to do that. This is again an option in the case of whether or not you would consider that or not, but it is one of the considerations of dependent coverage and how that's affected as part of the total damage package that's done. So we also consider the dependents as part of the module in the software of personal injury. This allows you to develop each of the individuals that would be dependent, and it's always based upon their birth date and their age and the ending care date. Household services. Household services always go up depending upon an injury. They have an intangible cost besides wages. What is being produced by that individual as a unit of production. Here we have a projected services without the injury. And we have another tab, actual and projected service with the injury. Certainly, without the injury, a person is provided certain amounts of household services, and we define those in this particular area. And there are certain events that we have to put together on this. We have the actual and projected services without the injury, and we have a timeline on that, what those services are going to be. The question is, where do these services come from, and how do we pull those? These are the services are provided by a statistical data table, and we'll show that in a minute. dollar value of a day. It comes back. It's one of the production data tables. It gives an estimate of what those services are worth. We come back to the next tab, which is medical expenses. In a case of personal injury, we're going to have medical expenses that are going to be incurred in taking care of that person. This can include rehabilitation, doctor, surgery. Some of those providers, we list the providers here, but each of those services or medical expenses may vary. It may be an ongoing and continuous expense. It may have been a one-time expense. So even here in the software, it allows you as the analyst to determine and put in what that amount is and how it's going to continue. You'll find once you get into the software that this is pretty self-explanatory in filling out. We also have other damages. In this case, Ms. Garcia must have been involved in an automobile accident, and here there was also damages relating to the car repairs. This case, $3,917 worth of car repairs. So that would be added into the one-time expense, other damages to the calculation. You know, one thing that I did forget to discuss with earlier on about damage advocate and all of the modules that we have that specifically would be of interest to any user is that once you open up the damages advocate and you're wondering, well, how do I put stuff in? How do I really look at this and really get into it? One unique thing about damages advocate, we provide you with a sample case. So by looking at the sample case in damages advocate, you can follow along and see how a case is developed and what each of these little tabs underneath it are completed and what you need to complete for your particular engagement. So not only do you have an ongoing help source in the icon of filling out damages advocate and a complete tutorial, you also have a sample case to follow along so you can see exactly how a sample case and report is completely developed. Well, once we have the final other damages done, we have some calculation options, which is the final tab. Here, this is, again, somewhat statutory, but we're going to have to figure out how we're going to grow the household services that you put in. Are we going, what is the post-trial growth rate? We have interest and discounts rates. A lot of these are set by statute. Others will be set by you. Was there a pretrial interest rate, post-trial discount rate? Some manual input. You'll have to look and figure out how that's going to be done based upon your statute or the normal process where you practice. Here we have a pull down. What about the earnings growth rate? The earnings growth rate here comes from Bureau of Labor Statistics. Again, that is another data table. You'll have several data tables to choose from, and also the data tables by year that you're going to choose based upon your case. How about your discounting method? Are you going to do that compounded monthly or annually? You used to be able to choose that. Whether or not to use simple interest. Some statutes require simple interest. What about income taxes? Are income taxes to be considered or not to be considered? Again, becomes statute. Again, that requirement is outside the software. It's there for you to select. You will have to know based upon your jurisdiction. Even the state tax rate. Not all states have a tax rate to be considered, but at least it's in the software for application if necessary. What about in the report text when you export this to the report? Are you going to have your calculation net of inflation, which is a constant dollar method, or not? Again, this is something that you'll have to do a little bit of research on, but the software gives you that option, so we can fit all jurisdictions and fit all scenarios across the country. Once we have completed our calculation and filled out all the information that we need to do the calculation of damage, we reach the final spot, which is the creation of a report. Based upon the data that you've entered, we will create a report either in Microsoft Word or Adobe. We have access to both. And last but not least, from a source document or from a work paper standpoint, you can export all of your work into an Excel workbook in which you can audit. There are a number of individuals who say, I need to take this because I'm going to get a deposition and I got to show all my work and where I got all this. I've not necessarily seen that personally, where they bring out the workbook and have all the Excel stuff, but if necessary and you want to work with your work and see your calculations, it's there. Again, very transparent. Most people know what they're doing. They're sufficing. They have submitted a report, and they'll go over that report in the case of a deposition and or trial. And that's what we're going to get ready to look at. And we're going to look at both of these right now. As I stated before, once you've done all the calculations, you can automatically generate a report in Microsoft Word. Here shows a little bit of the heading and what it might look like. In this case, here's our Miss Garcia, the plaintiff. The report date, the expert's name, all pre-formatted, and you can make any adjustments to this. You get a good case overview, much like our valuation report, which is a quick overview and summary of the calculations and of the damages. You get a report damages summary, the future values, complete with the future values that are projected out, brought back to present value both on a pretrial and post-trial basis. And at the very bottom, you can see we've got the grand total damages. Grand total damages of the future value and what it is as the valuation date. In this case, we had grand total damages of Ms. Garcia of $1,457,000, but the present value of that is brought back to $918,014. One of the questions that many people ask, the report that's generated by damages advocate, is it a normal report? Well, I'm not sure what a normal report is, but I can say this, that report is pretty much similar to the type of economic damage report you would expect to see from a practicing forensic economist. Everybody has their own preference in terms of the length of the report and the detail. Because this is in Microsoft Word, you can add, subtract, enhance, or change any of the wording or style of the report once it's created. So that is up to you as the forensic financial analyst. But it gives you a good basis, and it is of the type of the report that is customarily seen by personal injury attorneys as well as the attorneys representing insurance companies and other interested parties. So it's a good, sound document, and it also, again, reflects some of the economic damage publication works. So it is as you should expect. I promise to give you some data citations. This is contained in the software. You'll know exactly where your data tables have come from, where your life expectancy tables have come from, your occupational earnings, where the fringe benefits that were input, where the pretrial growth rates were coming from, the life expectancy of dependents comes from, in this case, Center Disease Control, household services, the expectancy data, dollar value of a day, which is published annually, the pretrial growth of household services, where that comes from, Bureau of Labor Statistics. You'll kind of note that these were all government publications. Even the dollar value a day was a government publication for the longest time. This is unique when dealing with personal economic damages. There's a lot of, I believe, there's a lot less subjectivity into the calculation because you're using statistical studies that are produced by the government or related parties. So while there is always a question to every calculation of damages, the real response is, because it's statistics and it's based on these law of large numbers, yes, that's true, but more likely than not, this would be the number. I mean, we have mortality tables, we have life expectancy tables, we have household service tables that are put together with good data. It makes a lot more sense in using these type of tables in forensic economic damages than it does you or I deciding exactly how much a person's worth for mowing the lawn once a week and how much the loss is because that person now has to go hire someone to mow their lawn, and then developed all of those individual services that are unique to the individual. The data tables are a tremendous assistance for us that work in the forensic financial analysis area. The Excel spreadsheet. You want a source document for everything that you did in Damages Advocate. This is what it looks like. Again, very transparent. You export it out. You've got an Excel workbook with each of the tabs. They include earnings, services, expenses. You can see exactly how they've been calculated and what those numbers were. You can check your work. It's all laid out for you. So you're not going to have to create your own model. And speaking of your own model, how long do you think it might take you to create a workbook, to create and calculate a personal economic damage calculation, a personal injury? How long would it take you to make a workbook to calculate a wrongful death damage case or a wrongful termination case, and to update that report, and then update that report every time a new data table came out? And what's the possibility you might make an error in that calculation? These are all things to think about when you're dealing with personal economic damages as a forensic financial analyst. What's the complexity and what area are linking those to spreadsheet? And more likely, once you've created your own Excel workbook in case, are you going to be able to link that to Microsoft Word? How are you going to create the report? Is it going to be linked, or every time you do a report, are you going to have to start from scratch and custom do it? And then time you'd put it and value what your time is worth in getting that calculation to your client. Are you competitive in the marketplace? These are all questions I'd ask. You should ask yourself as you look at Damages Advocate and the field of personal economic damages. What's this deal going to cost me? On the screen, I've given you some of the current pricing for Damages Advocate for a single application or even up to 3 applications. I was kind of getting ready to close, and I give you the damages advocate value proposition. You've got engagement management software that's process-driven. I think that you'll find that the software provides you cost, time, and reliability advantages. You're not going to have to update the software or the databases or your Microsoft Office. You're going to get technically and timely updates on everything that you need, both in the software and the data tables. You're going to be able to create master case files for your clients to learn from, and you'll have them at your fingertips. And best of all, the case management files are secure and encrypted. It's another thing that you don't have to do. And that's our damages advocate proposition for those trying to determine personal economic damages. One last item before we close today, or answer any questions. If you purchase Damage Advocate within the next couple of weeks, you can receive a $100 discount. Maybe better, I don't know. But I encourage you to call your value source rep at the 800 number shown on the screen. Likewise, I invite you to give us any questions that you have or feedback to Dave Miles or myself. My email address is shown on the screen above. Encourage you to drop me a line, ask me any questions that you have or any way that I can assist you in this area, and I'll do my darndest to do such.
And Jeff, the only question we had to do with the work-life studies, and basically the question was, how does that work? And what I had told the person, and we should probably say out loud, is that there's 3 or 4 studies that are input into the system, and you can choose any one of those studies that you would like. The follow-on question was, can you use an average of those studies? And the answer is no, but you could select a study, find out what the work-life expectancy is, select another study, find out what the work-life expectancy is, and then average the two together if that's where you wanted to go with that. And I don't know if you wanted to say anything more about work-life expectancy.
No, I mean, my deal with work-life expectancy, it goes back to two points on this, and this is where the software stops and the individual has to go the extra mile. First of all, we did show that you have the opportunity to either choose a work-life study or to manually input it in terms of when that person's work life is going to end. But if we're using a work-life study, then it's going to be upon the individual user to determine one of two things. One, which study do you, as a forensic financial analyst, feel most comfortable in and you can defend. In an example, if you were in a deposition or trial and someone were to ask you, why did you use that particular study, you need to be able to give a good reason why you use that one particular study over another study. The other alternative would be this: working with a experienced personal injury attorney or an insurance company or within a given jurisdiction. There may be a preference to a particular study. The court, the trier of fact, that hears these cases day in, day out, you may get some insight that they have a personal preference, you call it bias if you wish, toward a particular study. In that case, it's going to behoove you to use that particular study in the jurisdiction, in the court that your case is going to be heard or case is going to be involved. That would be my direction toward that question.
Sounds great. And that was the only question that I saw on the panel. As Jeff said, feel free to email him or get a hold of him. My email address is dmiles, D-M-I-L-E-S, like 500 miles down the road, at valuesource.com. And you're welcome to contact me, and I'll be happy to answer anything I can answer or forward you off to Jeff. And feel free to give ValueSource a call and ask for either one of us. At this time, I'd like to say thank you very much for spending an hour with us or 55 minutes with us and learning more about Damages Advocate, economic damages on the personal side of things. And I hope that you have a couple takeaways from today. Jeff, thank you very much for a great presentation. Really appreciate it. And at this point here, I'm going to close out of the webinar and let everybody go. So have a great one and a better Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everyone.